Hey YouTubes, good day, God bless. Today we're going to be talking about the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah compared to the marriage of Mohammed and Aisha. Now this YouTuber, Optic Films, is a Muslim and he recently wrote and asked me, why do you have a problem with the Prophet Muhammad's marriage to Aisha? When in fact, according to the Jews, Isaac was 37 years old at the time of his binding. And what he's talking about here is when Yahweh God told Abraham to take Isaac up on Mount Moriah and sacrifice him. Then he goes on and says Rebekah's birth reached Abraham immediately after that event, and that's recorded in Genesis 22:23 when Rebekah is born. Um, Genesis 25:20 says that Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, therefore making Rebekah 3 years old. So what he's basically saying is that when Isaac and Abraham went up on Mount Moriah, Isaac was 37 years old. Rebekah was born after that. So since Genesis 25:20 says Isaac was 40 when he married her, that means Rebekah had to be 3 years old. So that's what he's claiming. Now, was Rebekah 3 years old when Isaac married her? It is a well-known fact that Muhammad had sex with a child. Aisha reported, Muhammad married me when I was 6 years old, and I was admitted to his house when I was 9 years old. Admitted to his house is sexual intercourse. You can find this in Sahih Muslim, Book 8, number 3310. Now, the only Islamic sources that are higher than Sahih is the Quran itself. After the Quran is Sahih. Now, this clearly proves that Muhammad married a child and Muhammad had sex with the child. So, in an attempt to justify and defend Muhammad's sexual abuse of a child, Muslims often appeal to certain rabbinic sources, traditions, laws, which claim that Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, who was only 3 years old. Now, there is rabbinic laws in the Midrash or Talmud, whatever, that says that you can enter into marriage with a 3-year-old. However, that's not in the Bible. There's no Christian, okay, there's no Messianic Jew that accepts that, and not all Jews accept that. So to say that according to the Jews this is true is false. Okay, there's only certain people that listen to the rabbis as if their word is better than the Bible. Now, as I said, this law is not in the Bible, and I'm going to show you in the Bible where that claim that Isaac married Rebekah when she was 3 is a lie. Now, first we have to establish a couple things. Genesis 11:29 says, And Abraham and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. So basically here you see Abraham and Nahor are brothers. Okay, Abraham is married to Sarai. This is before he was Abraham and she was Sarah. And his brother Nahor marries a woman named Milcah. Keep that in mind. Now, let's jump down here to Genesis 12:1, where it says, Now Yahweh had said unto Abraham, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. Then in Genesis 12:4 it says, So Abraham departed as Yahweh had spoken unto him, and Lot, which is his nephew, went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old. You need to keep that in mind. So we see here Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran for Canaan. Abraham took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his servants. You can read that in Genesis 12:5. Nahor is not present, so he is separated from Nahor, his brother, as I showed you in Genesis 12:1. And actually, if you read in Genesis 12:31, this is when they're really separated. So it's even before that, but we're just going to go with that right now. Now, let's jump down to right here. Now, Optics Films claims that Isaac is 37 years old at the time of his binding. Now, the Bible does not say this, and I can easily challenge Optic Films to prove it by using the scriptures. But for this argument's sake, I will agree with him. So I'm just going to agree with him that Isaac is 37 years old when Abraham takes him up on Mount Moriah. But if I wanted to, I can challenge him to prove it. Now, this means that Abraham has to be 137. That's because the Bible tells us Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. And you can read that in Genesis 17:21 and 21:5 right here. It says Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. So if Isaac is 37 years old when they went up on Mount Moriah, that means Abraham has not seen or heard from Nahor, his brother, in at least 62 years. Remember, that was in Genesis 12:4. Okay, even longer if we hold to the scriptures and use Genesis 11:31 as the actual separation date of Abraham and Nahor. Now keep this in mind. He has not seen or spoken to his brother in 62 years. If you want to challenge me on this point, then I challenge you to open the Bible and prove me wrong. Now, continuing on. Now, Optic Films appeals to Genesis 22, verses 20 through 23, and says, immediately after that event, Genesis 22:23 says, Rebekah is born. When Isaac is 40 years old, he married Rebekah, therefore making Rebekah 3 years old. I showed you where Optic Films claimed that. Now, Optic Films is claiming that after Yahweh God tested Abraham on Moriah, the sacrifice of Isaac, that Rebekah was born immediately after that. However, Genesis 22 verses 20 through 23 says no such thing. Now, let's break down these verses and I'm going to show you the truth. Now, Genesis 22:20 says, and it came to pass after these things, this is after Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah, okay, that it was told to Abraham, saying, behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. The text does not say Rebekah was born after Abraham and Isaac on Moriah, but only says that Abraham was told his brother Nahor had children. I've already shown that Abraham and Nahor haven't seen or heard from each other in at least 62 years. And actually since Genesis 11:31. So he was simply informed that his brother had children. Now, furthermore, it's impossible that Rebekah was born after the test on Moriah because of what Genesis 22 verses 21 through 23 say. Now, pay close attention to what this says. I'm going to break it down and prove that there's no way Rebekah was only 3 years old. Verse 21, Huz, his firstborn. Whose firstborn? Nahor and Milcah's firstborn. Then Buz, then Kemuel, then Chesed, then Hazo, then Pildash, then Yidlaf, then Bethuel. Then, verse 23 says, Bethuel begot Rebekah. These 8, Milcah, that's Nahor's wife, which would be Abraham's sister-in-law, did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Now, which 8 is it talking about? Which 8 are the children of Nahor? Huz 1, Buz 2, Kemuel 3, Chesed 4, Hazo 5, Pildash 6, Yildlaf 7, Bethuel 8. And then Bethuel begot Rebekah. This proves that Rebekah was the granddaughter of Nahor, not his actual daughter. Read the text. Now, Optic Films claims that Nahor's children were born immediately after Abraham and Isaac on Moriah. This means that Bethuel, Nahor's son and Rebekah's father, was born when Isaac was 37 years old. This is what the case would be if these children were born after Isaac and Abraham went up on Moriah. This would mean that Bethuel would have had to have Rebekah when he was less than 1 year old. So Bethuel would have had to have been born after Abraham and Isaac went up on Mount Moriah when Isaac was 37. Then he would have had to impregnate a woman as an infant. That woman would have had to given birth to Rebekah 3 years later when Isaac was 40, in order for what Optic Films is claiming to be true. So that would have to happen in order for Rebekah to be born after Abraham and Isaac on Moriah and to marry Isaac at age 3. Isaac was 40 when he married Rebekah, Genesis 22:20. Now, the other part to this is the text clearly says that Huz was the firstborn, then Buz, Kemuel, Chesed, all the way down. Bethuel was the 8th. This is how the Bible lists in order of the children being born. So Bethuel was actually the 8th of 8. So on top of this, Milcah would have had to have 8 children in less than a year. Then Bethuel, being the 8th child, would have had to impregnate a woman when he was an infant in order for Rebekah to be 3 years old when Isaac was 40. This proves that Abraham was simply told, informed, that his brother Nahor had children, and that was in Genesis 22:20. Not that Nahor's children were born at that time. This proves that all Nahor's sons and Rebekah were born before Abraham was informed and before Genesis 22:20. Now remember what Genesis 22:20 said. And it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother. Now remember, Abraham has not seen or heard from Nahor in 62 years. So it makes sense that he was informed after not hearing or seeing his brother in 62 years that she had borne all these children and Rebekah would be his granddaughter. That's enough time. So this is just proof, that Muslims try anything they can to distort the text. They don't actually read what the text says. So that alone refutes Optics Films' entire argument, and even those rabbinic people, those rabbinic Jews who are claiming such nonsense. The text clearly proves that that cannot be. Now here's other proofs. I'm not going to go through all these. In my other video I do, but all you need to do is read Genesis chapter 24 and listen to how it talks about Rebekah. Listen to how it describes Rebekah. Okay, now if you read verses 1 through 14, this is where Abraham sends his servant to find a wife for Isaac. Okay, and he ends up going to the city of Nahor, which is the city named after his brother. Now, if Abraham had been speaking to his brother, he would have known that, but he didn't know that because he hadn't spoke to the guy, his brother, in 62 years. Now, verse 15, this is how it describes Rebekah. Rebekah came out, okay, with a pitcher upon her shoulder. The Bible calls Rebekah a damsel, very fair, a virgin. Okay, it says she filled her pitcher and came up. It says that the servant, Abraham's servant, said to her, Let, I pray thee, me drink a little water of thy pitcher. So the servant is speaking to her. Verse 18, she said, Drink, my lord, and she hasted, and let down her pitcher upon her hand, and gave him drink. Verse 19 says she had give him drink. She drew water for the camels. Verse 20, she hasted. She emptied her pitcher into the trough. She ran to the well and drew more water. She drew for the camels. Verse 22 says that the servant gave Rebekah gold earrings, bracelets. Okay. Verse 23 says the servant was talking to Rebekah and asked, Whose daughter art thou? Okay. And then verse 24, she replies, okay, so she answers him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. Okay, once again proving that she's his Nahor's granddaughter. Verse 25, this is Rebekah speaking. She said, moreover unto him, the servant, we have both straw and provender enough for room to lodge in. Verse 28 calls Rebekah a damsel and says she ran. Now, here's some questions to optic films. Are 3-year-old babies referred to as damsels and virgins in the Bible? Find that. Show it to me. Do 3-year-old babies come walking to a well with pitchers on their shoulders? Do 3-year-old babies have conversations like adults with adults? Do 3-year-old babies fill and offer pitchers of water for men and for their camels? Do 3-year-old babies inform people of how many provisions their parents have? Does that really sound like stuff a 3-year-old baby is doing? Okay, now let's look in verse 57. Okay, it says that they actually inquired of Rebekah and asked her if she wanted to go. So they inquired her of her mouth, and they called Rebekah, and they said to her, will thou go with this man? She said, I will go. So they asked her. Okay, they asked Rebekah if she consented to go, and she agreed. Does that sound like a 3-year-old? Okay, verse 60. They blessed Rebekah and said, be the mother of thousands and millions. Okay, is that what people say to a 3-year-old? Verse 61. Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon camels. Do 3-year-olds have maidens and ride on camels? I mean, seriously. Verse 64, Rebekah lifted up her eyes, okay, when she saw Isaac, and lifted off the camel. She said to the servant, what man is this that walketh in the field? So she's talking. I mean, this is just clearly proof that you obviously didn't read. That shows this is not a 3-year-old baby. Do 3-year-olds see a man, ask about him with the knowledge that she's going to marry the man? And that is named, who is this man? She knows she's about to go marry somebody named Isaac. So she's talking. Do they lift up eyes? Okay. Do they get off the backs of camels? Do they put on veils and cover themselves? And then lastly, okay, it says Isaac brought her to his mother Sarah's tent, and she became his wife. Isaac brought a 3-year-old in with him to show his mother? I mean, seriously, is that what you're trying to say? What did Isaac do? Did he hold Rebekah in his arms? Did he bring this little baby into his mom and say, hey, mom, look at my wife? So just read Genesis 24, and it clearly is not talking about a 3-year-old. So that's proof right there, along with, what I showed you in Genesis 22, verses 20 through 23, which proves Rebekah and the children of Nahor had to have been born before Abraham was told that he had nephews and nieces and granddaughters and all that stuff. So when you say Isaac was 37 years old at the time of his binding, immediately after that event, Rebekah is born, you're lying. That's not what the text says. It says Abraham was told that his brother Nahor had children. It doesn't say anything about anyone being born after that. And like I said, I've shown you that that cannot absolutely be the case. Therefore, when you claim Rebekah was 3, you're wrong. So, Rebekah was not born when Isaac was 37. Okay, so she was not 3 years old. Now, there's also other rabbinic sources that say she was 14. There's other rabbinic sources that say she was a grown woman. So it's all over the place. You can't just make a claim. I've totally refuted you and shown she absolutely was not 3 years old. Now, Optic Films also refutes Islam altogether by appealing to these rabbinical sources in his defense of Muhammad marrying a 6-year-old and having sexual intercourse with a child of 9 years old. I only appeal to the Quran and Hadith because you, Muslims, believe them. So I use them to prove to you that Islam is false. You, Optic Films, appeal to rabbinical sources like the Midrash and the Talmud, but I don't accept those. So by appealing to these sources, you've agreed that you, Optic Films, hold them to be authoritative. That's why you used them. Now, What does it mean to be authoritative? Able to be trusted as being accurate or true, reliable, clear, authoritative information of text considered to be the best of its kind and unlikely to be improved upon. So you're quoting authoritative sources that are authoritative to you in your defense of Muhammad. So if you're going to do that, guess what else those same sources say about Islam? These same Jewish sources say, number one, Yeshua, Jesus, did die. He was hanged on the eve of Passover. This refutes Surah 4:157, in which Muhammad claimed Jesus was not slew. Number two, these same sources say Yeshua is not the Messiah. This refutes Surah 3:45, which says Jesus was Messiah. Number three, these sources say Mary was not a virgin, but had an affair with a Roman soldier named Pandera, or Panthera, Pandera, Pantera, Pantera. This refutes Surah 19, ayahs 20 through 21, and Surah 21, ayah 91, which says Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. And number four, these same rabbinical sources that you're quoting to try to prove Isaac was 40 and Rebekah was only 3, to try to justify Muhammad's behavior of marrying and having sex with a child, says Yeshua was a sinful student who practiced magic and turned to idolatry. This would refute Surah 19:19, which says Jesus was sinless, faultless, and pure. So if you're going to use those rabbinic sources to try to lie and claim that Isaac married Rebekah when she was only 3, well, those same sources you're using, that you're claiming stuff to me, refute Islam. So when you say this and you claim this, you're also claiming Islam is false. So I've proven that Rebekah absolutely was not 3 years old. So good day and God bless.